And it's the same thing. So if you're struggling internally and people are like, oh yeah, I know that you were depressed for years, everyone can tell. Like, how awful would that be?
Well, also imagine being that person and being like, what do you mean you knew? Like,
And you
I'm
didn't do
struggling
anything.
about this, and you didn't like say, hey, I know. Like we've had a
Yeah.
million personal
Couldn't tell
conversations, and you're
me.
never like, hey, did you
Yeah.
happen? Like, we all know, so you can chill, you know?
I know.
No, it's hopefully the culture changes. Today, the dorks are talking to Kristina Henkai about burnout in the construction industry and how encouraging play and understandings of others and belonging can help to decrease the general level of burnout, increase happiness, and make our job sites a better place.
And we're live. That's right. Episode 63. The dorks are back. This one is the Burnout Brigade. And we have a fantastic guest. Kristina Henkai is with us today from So Built. We're going to get into that. We're going to have a whole bunch of fun. It's just me and my boy Jonathan on the wheels here. So we get to have a great conversation with Kristina, which some of you might recognize her voice, but we'll get to that in a minute. Jonathan, I'm starting off. I'm trying to fight the burnout brigade with some Celsius today. And I have been told I probably don't need more uppity drinkity stuff, but today it's the end of a long week. I need it. Been balancing my daughter has off of it's spring break week here. So spring break week, but my son's in school. So and having to all that stuff. Y'all don't want to hear about me though. You want to hear about Jonathan? Jonathan, what you got tonight?
I'm doing a Four Roses, all right.
Oh,
But in true conference fashion, I'm doing a really watered down whiskey sour with it. like
mm.
like so it's really like conference where it's like 90% water, a little bit sour, a little bit of whiskey. Because I've had a long day too, and I don't want to go to sleep. It's 6:30 here. I do not want to be asleep by 8:30, so I'm gonna limit the indulgences today.
Awesome. Well, Kristina, welcome to the show. What are you drinking? And introduce yourself if you would.
I also have a two drink combo, and it's a combination similar to you guys. So I've been doing a blue bottle cold brew all day, and it's because my day is not stopping, even though it's 6:30. My sister's gonna come over in an hour, and we're gonna plan her wedding. So I
Oh, right
also
on.
have straight rum in a wine glass because I don't care about containers like that. That's what I'm doing here.
Yeah.
That's a big Friday evening planning a
Oh
wedding.
yeah. Yeah. It's the wedding's in a month, and so we've been planning it, maid of honor. So busy day, busy week, busy year. I don't know what to say.
Hey, I think we could all agree with the speed of which life is running right now is very interesting. I don't think it's healthy. And I think that's what we're going to talk about. But I am going to call it out for those of you that are not watching. Kristina has this interesting thing on that's hard to kind of see where it is right now, but I'll describe it for those driving because we're cool about it. It is a name tag that is made out of Legos that has her name on it. And I believe that's the Mandalorian that we have
Yes, it's the
on there.
Mandalorian.
And that kind of segues into where would one get a badge like that?
Well, they would get it from my box right here. But
Ching!
Jeff, yours is here. We got Gray's, Nathan's, everyone. It's instead of the conference lanyards that we always get, and I don't know about you, but like I always feel like, what do I do with this thing? It's plastic. I don't want to throw it away. It seems wasteful. It's brand new. That whole noise, just getting rid of it, is going to be the name tags at the summit this summer, So Built Summit in Austin.
So
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about you. So you got a little background in the industry, done a few things here. Tell us a little bit about you, and so people listening in kind of know a little bit more about you.
Okay. Yeah. I started off in project controls with a big GC, Bechtel. I went to lots of different projects in the field, in the office. And the one thing that just really hooked me was 4D. So just, I don't know if you know what that is, Jeff, but
I do. It's the fourth dimension.
Yeah.
Time, as it were.
And what I really loved about it was just how it it's such a great tool to bring people who are typically siloed together, right? And it's just like it was like magic when I first did it. The way you can speak to a superintendent. What in
Yeah.
the
Dude, I
world?
want a Super Nintendo on my job site.
We all want Super
Super
Oh my
Nintendo.
Nintendons at our job site.
He
But
went
they
Super
are OG.
Nintendo
So
and
like
met superintendent. All right.
so like the way you can bring together though a superintendent and a project manager that's been fighting for months and have them come to an agreement by the end of like a short 30-minute session using a 4D model that's tied to real tangible work steps, not just like that flashy pretty picture shit that I hate honestly, but like real useful practical visual planning. And so that's where I got hooked is when I saw the behavioral change that could happen from it. Um, met and that was sort of like the catalyst for diving deeper into behavioral changes and seeing these people, silos, collaboration. And I don't know how much backstory. I guess like
Well,
eventually I started
you could go into the backstory, or y'all might now recognize Kristina's voice. You might have heard her before here. If you want to hear like the real deal, we interviewed Kristina was part of a throwdown interview with Gray Childs, Jonathan, me, Nathan Wood, Kristina, and
Tito Tom.
Tito Tom.
Tito
Yeah,
Tom.
I was going for the rhyme right there. And Tito Tom, and that is episode 58, the anti keynote. If you guys want to scroll back now, you can catch them up a little bit. I would say catch people up because they're not going to just stop their cars.
Yeah.
But you had a little experience coming out of that's kind of driven you to where you are today.
Yeah, because 4D was so niche or niche, whatever the word is, niches, riches. I became a bottleneck. And that's the true definition of what like a solo high performer is they become a bottleneck. And that led to my burnout in silence. And ultimately I left the company. All the details is I lost control of my body. My body decided to take matters in its own hands because I stopped listening to it. It said, feed me, let me sleep, let me rest, let me rest. And I just kept ignoring it and said, like, work, almost there. So I had the burnout. I said, I should leave this entire industry because it's starting to hurt my family. It's not just hurting me, it's hurting others. And I was so close to leaving construction completely. And then I realized, like, you know what? I love so much about this industry. And really, I just wish that this doesn't happen to anybody else. But I knew 100% this was happening currently or going to happen to other people unless we started to change some things. So I started So Built, which is shortened for the Society for Built Experiences, which is the whole mission is how do we build beyond that daily grind? How do we build experiences that help us bring awareness and come out of that sort of silent suffering and stoicism that many of us naturally gravitate towards, including myself. Yeah, you got me on that episode. I don't even know. I was just like free flowing. I was like cursing and everything. And like, am I allowed to do this? So all the details are there. I was fired up too. But all in all, I realized I wasn't the only one. And I think I made it my mission really to find other people that were having that silent suffering and trying to find ways to tangibly pull them out and help them feel more fulfilled in a career in construction.
And I think there's a level at which that's a really, really big problem for us right now as technology starts to step in. Because like you said, with the 4D scheduling, it is really niche. And in order to understand it, you're not going to train your entire staff to do 4D scheduling. You're going to train one or two champions, and they're going to be the person that you lean on. So if what they do is done well, you tend to lean on them more and more and more. And I think for a lot of people that have a technical job, there's not an understanding of what to do personally to mitigate some of that and to say, okay, well, that's beyond what I'm going to be able to deal with. And in a deadline driven, industry like we have, and I think that we should really underline deadlines. We are a deadline industry, and that dead word should be like capitalized and underlined, and everything else is, there isn't a second chance on a lot of the stuff we do. So I think we really are in that little pressure cooker. And with the technology coming on, and with a lot of young people being the people looked at to run that technology rather than older people who might have who might have built up some skills in this prior, I think we really are like going to start to just burn out the best people we have. And it's not the bad people we burn out, right? Because a bad person will sit back. It's everybody who has talent. So, I was really inspired by your story when you said it back in the other episode, or, down there in Austin. But I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into like how you're trying to move the needle with So Built. Like what is some of the strategy? Because I think the other thing to identify about Kristina, which she's not going to say about herself, she's extremely intelligent and very, very strategic in her thinking. So I think that's part of what made her a good 4D scheduler. So give us an idea of like, what is your understanding? What is your strategy with So Built, and what are you trying to achieve for the industry?
I don't take compliments well, but I've been practicing the word thank you when someone does it, even though it's awkward, but thank you. So strategy wise for So Built is it's really focusing on three core concepts that I think most of us don't fully find in one place, but we should. It's belonging, purpose, and curiosity. Okay. And most times we find ourselves in a 1 out of 3 or a 2 out of 3 situation. I'll give you an example. When I was in an innovation group, I had lots of belonging, fun stuff, all that, recognition. And I had a lot of curiosity and ability to play and deal with the unknown. So 2 out of 3. But many days I was wondering, what are all these ideas actually doing for people and for projects and like real bottom line, and like it didn't feel tangible enough. So I went to a project. Purpose was 100% checked, but the morale was really bad. And so belonging went down. Also, everything, because the morale was so bad and no one trusted each other, everything was so tight that there was no room for the unknown, for playing, for curiosity. So that went down. I went 2 out of 3 to 1 out of 3. And then I noticed that throughout my own career and other people I spoke to, it seemed to be always getting a 2 out of 3 max. And there was like only the sweet spot that a few people would get 3 out of 3. So the strategy is, how do we create experiences and programs so that people can achieve, belonging, purpose, and curiosity all together at the degree at which they need, which is a whole nother thing. So I have retreats that hits belonging and curiosity really deeply. I have the summit that hits actually all of them, belonging, purpose, and curiosity. And then I'm starting a coaching program where I want a community of people and helping them implement these sort of ideas in their own careers and projects. So that's very purpose driven. And some people will absolutely need that coaching. Some people don't. They just need a retreat, right? So I wanted to create a very simplified menu that is still catering to that trifecta of all three. And there are different types of ways to do it, but never the traditional sort of like speaking to people, directive, and none of that. It's all experiential. It's based off of learning and growth and connection between people. So, does that answer?
It was an awesome answer. I think one of the interesting things is like, if you read about motivation nowadays, it's usually autonomy, mastery, and purpose. They say that for creatives, autonomy, mastery, and purpose are how you motivate them. All right. And the thing that I think that you hit that's really important about that is while autonomy or having control over what we do is a real motivator for us, the lack of belonging goes along with autonomy. And I do see that is like for really smart people that are looking, because I'm one of those people that wants autonomy. I do not want a boss. Like, I actually believe that a lot of the time when you see people burning out, the reason is because they have a boss, and the boss is sort of dealing with, they're sort of putting that pressure there. And if you have autonomy, you don't have the boss, so you have a little bit more, a little bit more room. But I think without belonging, you still don't know when you're right next to burnout, because there's no one to tell you. And I think self-assessment of burnout, like, what is your view on self-assessment to burnout? Like I would love to hear that, because you've studied this, and I don't. So
Well,
so tell me.
the first thing I want to say that you made me think of, which is autonomy and bosses, and how they're almost positioned as opposite conditions, right? Like, you can't have autonomy with a boss, or you own, that sort of situation.
Often
And I
not
don't think
true. Yeah,
that's
yeah.
right. That is not true. Um, Likewise, if you go to a very level or flat organization that has no bosses, you can actually feel so disconnected if there isn't a very intentional connection between everybody, and advocacy and investment in like that core belonging. Um, so I just wanted to mention that, which is like, just because you're a boss doesn't mean you can't have autonomy,
Oh,
and vice
absolutely,
versa, right?
absolutely.
Um, what did you ask me? You asked me about
What I
assessment.
would, yeah, like, how do people self-assess? Because I've talked to a lot of people, and what you guys didn't see before this episode was that Kristina walked in, looked at Jeff, and said, "I think you're tired," and that ability of, like, people who know you, they look at you in a second, and they're like, "Oh, you feel tired," and A, they have to know you. B, they have to feel comfortable enough with you to say that, because there can be people that don't want to put off those vibes. So, like, what do you think of self-assessment? What do you tell people about that, if you do message about that at all?
Yeah, I think self-awareness is critical, because if you don't self-assess, and that doesn't mean like badmouth yourself, right? Like, but it's just assessment. It's clinical, it's data driven. To drive some self-awareness of, and I go back to that framework of belonging, purpose, and curiosity, because within each of those, there's three subcategories that I think inform the bigger name. So, for example, in belonging, uh, I like to do a red light, green light, yellow light situation with people. And so within there, I ask, do you trust your leaders, and do you think they trust you? Because one of the words is trust. Red light, green light, red light, green, red, yellow.
Yeah.
And then the next one is, do you feel advocated for? Do you think that people are speaking for you behind doors, right? So, like, do you feel that advocacy? And then the third is, are you being invested in? Is your education and your growth being invested? Are you being compensated? And it's those three words that I think ultimately will hit everybody in feeling some sort of sense of like, all right, I belong here. I trust these people. I know they got my back, and they're taking care of me. Because that's what trust, advocacy, and investment is, right? And so if that all comes as yellow, that's not a great sign. If you have red, that's a terrible sign. Like, there needs to be a lot of rectifying. Similarly, there are three subcategories for purpose and three subcategories for curiosity. I won't go into all those details, but in curiosity, the critical one to me is play. Are you having fun? Do you feel like you can be creative? Are there playful moments? And you can find that out by asking yourself if you smiled today and if it was real. Because that second part's really important. Because a lot of times, if you're just like super focused, I have total resting bitch face when I'm focused. I'm just like, I was like, really. And that is a very highly productive disconnected mode. You need that sometimes. But if that's your every day, if that's your every week, then your brain isn't resting. It doesn't get that playful rest. It doesn't get to think up different things. And so what it does is it just like digs you down deeper into just what has been, and it never allowed you to grow into what could be. So I do that traffic light exercise with people, and it usually brings some awareness.
Right on.
Yeah.
You hit on a couple of things there. I'm interested in the drawing the lines between Jonathan and you on belonging, purpose, and curiosity, and autonomy, mastery. And what was your third one, Jonathan? Autonomy, mastery, and purpose.
Autonomy, mastery, and purpose, and they're not mine. They're Daniel Pink. He
did yeah, they're Daniel Pink's.
Yeah, he did a bunch of research on what motivates creatives and how to use it properly. And it really was that, how to use it properly, which kind of bugged me. But I agree with him. Like, I think that I'm one of those guys, and I think that works. So the belonging part, I think, is missed, and I think it's important, like fundamentally important. So, and I think it does have a little bit of tension with, like you said, like from when I was describing the boss, I was describing the bad boss. And I tend to do that, but there is tension between autonomy and belonging, and finding that tension and where it should sit, I think, is a great part of being balanced. When do you need to feel like you belong to a group, and when do you really need like alone time, and that type of autonomy? Go ahead, Jeff. I was just kind of
no, that was right. And we're autonomy versus belonging is got to be a very hard thing for leaders to manage, because you do want your creatives to be creative. You want them to be in that perfect spot. I mean, I really liked Drive, Daniel Pink's book, and looking at how to do that is like, that's great. We want to use our people the best way we possibly can, because when I say that, I don't mean that word has a connotation of like use somebody. It's not that. It's like really make them give them a place to be effective, to get the most with them. I think we have to change our wording there. And I'm interested in Kristina, where your head goes when you think about how someone can connect autonomy and belonging, and it's got to have come up, and what you can teach them how to do, or how can leaders balance that?
It has come up, and I remember the first time it did, because I'm like, I mean, just, it's not a hard thing because of who I live with, because of who I'm married to, which is a massive introvert. And he requires so much solo time and space. But the thing about belonging is it doesn't mean belonging is such a relative term, and a good leader first needs to build trust with their people in order to figure out what their levels are. How much advocacy do they want? How much, and where do they want their investments? How do they build trust with each other? And for example, with my husband, belonging isn't like inviting him to all the parties. Really, that's actually probably hurtful. Like he does, because then he has to deny it every time because he just doesn't want to do that. And we have such a, like, there's such trust, like I said, and you can build trust outside of a marriage, obviously, because we all trust each other. To not put each other in situations where we are deeply uncomfortable, only slightly uncomfortable. And so when I think of autonomy, I think of people being empowered, people feeling like they can work on their own, like their boss can trust that they're working, even though they're at home and there's no camera, right? Like, that is autonomy. It's not, to me, it's really, it's actually a part of it. Like, you have to respect people's levels of comfort and how much autonomy they need and how much care they need on that flip side, right? Because if somebody needs a lot more care, that's their sense of belonging. That's how you can build trust with them. Does that make sense? I think of it like children, actually. Like, I have this one child who requires so much physical touch and playing and quality time. It like really drains me, but that's his. And he He knows that he belongs. My other one, if I were to do that to him, he would get exhausted. He'd be like, let me just work, like focus. I want to play with my letters. I want to play with my Legos. And we have had conversations, very open conversations about that. Like, Kai, do you want to hang out with us or do you want to play right there in the same room? Play right there in the same room. And why are we not having that conversation often enough is because people are afraid to ask those questions to their own employees, even though that's something that you would do to anybody that you respect, like your children, like your family, right? You need to ask them what they need. And then in return, you tell them what you need. It's so simple. And that's how you build your trust. But we're like afraid and we're sidestepping. And we just need to stop leading with fear of we're leading with fear. We need to stop leading with fear.
I think you hit on something there, and it's not how we built business, right? That's not how we were taught business when we were younger. And I came into the business world 25 years ago, and it was keep your head down and get your work done and show up and turn the lights on, and striving and burning the midnight oil was that's how you made your way. And that's changed a lot, but it is still really hard for leaders to understand, because I think when they hear fear, they misconstrue it. Like when we think fear, I think initially people's minds go to the big bad boogeyman and yelling at people and, ruling with an iron fist. Like fear is such a nuanced thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it can be communicated verbally. It can be communicated through corporate action, through, and so I feel like that's missed. And I'm wondering, like, how do you communicate? How do you get someone to understand that, like, they're actually using fear, but they don't realize it? Like, I don't think that's necessarily an overt thing. I don't think a lot of leaders out there are leading with fear because they want to. I think they're leading with fear because they don't realize
it. Yeah. You are so correct in that that's not what's been on the surface of business for decades. But we as human beings have always wanted these things. It's only now that we're brave enough to ask for them also in our work, right? like we always wanted it. We talked about that example you mentioned with the military, right?
Mm-hmm.
How many people are tired? Everyone. But how many will admit they're lonely? None of them. Because
so for anybody listening, that was pre-show. So we'll do a quick recap for you. We were discussing, I was reading the book Dare to Lead by Brene Brown. And by the way, just totally in love with Brene and Simon Sinek and Adam Grant. And I was inspired to read that one by listening to a podcast with the three of them, where she kind of highlighted this. And what she was talking about was she was speaking in front of the military. And I believe she's actually reading a letter from a sergeant that learned from her. And I'm probably butchering this, but in the end, basically asked this group, how many of you out there are tired? And they all raised their hand. Like, it was pretty much like 90% of the room. And then asked the question about how many of you are lonely, and nowhere near as many hands went up. And then they started talking through loneliness, and she started to realize that most of them started to realize that they were actually lonely. And what is the side effect of loneliness and depression? It's being tired all the time. And unfortunately, in the military and possibly in business, when someone is tired, what do? We send them home. We tell them to get some rest. We're pushing them away into a space where it is not possible for them to actually get what they need, because we're not putting the name on it, right? We are deathly afraid to use words in business that mimic our personal lives. We don't use loneliness. We don't use love. We don't use those terms in business. It does not happen much. And even I think even in that thing, one person was like, well, I talked to my my people about being disconnected. She goes, that's such a sterile word. Don't use it. Use the fucking word. Lonely.
Yeah. We don't use those words, but we sure as hell feel them. But we won't admit them. So here's the thing about that. I play a very middle ground when it comes to some of these words, because in my experience, if you really want a sustainable behavioral change, you need a combination of something innovative, an innovative idea, and comfort. You have to have both. If you only go with comfort, that's not change. Get the hell out of here. If you only go with innovation, then that's people can feel attacked, right? And so I think the language is really important. And what I like to do is I allow other people to put their own words on it sometimes. And then I can get a bearing of where they're at. Like, is this a very vulnerable group or is this a very stoic group? And then I think you bring the awareness by having them name these experiences and have them name it and have them share, and then you translate it. Because if you translate too early, then you're dictating, you're lecturing, right?
Yeah, you're talking about how you chip away at this, and I think you're right. This is how you chip away at it. What I think Brené's point was like, we got to stop. She was using a lot of ways to chip away at it and saying, listen, you can't just put it in your daily that you're going to talk to people about being disconnected. That's not going to work. And you're talking about when you get a group in a setting like this, you can begin to chip away at the armor till eventually the goal is to name it. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And not even just,
why do I keep, I'm like, everybody's watching, like I'm chiseling over here. Like,
it's like ting, ting. I'm bad at sound effects.
That's all right.
But not even just a group. Like I remember I told you about Carl. Carl was my boy. He's like my boy. He's like 60 years older than me at the time. And he was just grumpy, stereotypical crotchety guy that would just like he didn't speak, he just grunted, you know what I mean? And like he was always had like a cigar plus an extra. Like that was his whole thing. He was a superintendent, if you couldn't tell. And with him, it was the same way. I couldn't be like, Carl, tell me how you feel so I can make your life better. Fuck you. Like that would not work. And so that's what I mean. It's like it's not even just a group thing. It's like, how do you come at people? Makes a world of difference. And I'm much more in the camp of like I'm a more nurturing type where I'm like, let me see where you're at. Let me baseline the current conditions. And let's dream about future conditions and how do you sort of slowly bring someone out of there. So with him, he hated project controls. So by association, he hated me. And so I was useless from ground zero, like just useless immediately. But what I did is I started to ask him things that he was working on, things he needed, and not in like a reporty way, like, okay, what are you doing? Because that again is not the right comfort level for him because he's not accepting that. In the end, he was providing me Excel input, like a computer, and I think he was like 70, 75 at the time, Excel input for his weekly look aheads and taking me to these like secret walk downs and telling me all the secret stuff he's not telling management because we had that trust because of how I came at it. And I think people try to rush it and it doesn't, like we weren't late. We weren't behind. In fact, because I took such a gradual, nurturing approach in the beginning, we were super fast with all our deliverables when we got to that point, and it was sustaining. So I think that sometimes people are looking for the diet pill. You know what I mean? And they're like, well, how do I fix this guy? He doesn't work with anybody. This happened again at another project. I'm not sure if I can mention it, but I can mention the people. He was someone that spoke a different language, and he was not working with anybody, and he had years of experience, super knowledgeable, but he couldn't communicate. And they called some people in to fix him. Okay, false start.
that has false start written all over it.
Yeah. But that's the idea. It's like, difficult person, how do we fix them? And I think that's the wrong approach. I think that's the diet pill approach, right? Like, I think you need to figure out what is the regimen. You know, I don't know why I'm dying into this, but what's the exercise plan? What's the diet plan to change this person's behavior, to understand their current conditions? And I spoke with him in the first minute. He totally told me off. He was so rude. He was like, you're only here for a field trip. Get the hell out of my way. All this sort of stuff, right? And then by the end of that day, and I think I spoke to him for an hour and a half after total, he was giving me secrets again. Like, it was a different guy, but he was giving me secrets. He's like, okay, I'm honest. And he didn't actually like speak full English, but this is how we were like communicating. And I actually texted him and I translated it and I like gave it like a whole message on my phone. But he gave me the secrets. He's like, I haven't shown this to real project controls. They don't know this. This is the real plan. This is the real plan. Now that is trust.
Mm-hmm.
But how did I get there differently than the other approach? The other approach, somebody came in and they were like, this is me and I'm here to fix you. That doesn't work. And yet people are still doing it. There's I don't know if I can reference this, but I sent it to you, Jonathan, which is a Mandalorian scene. Shoot, I can't remember. I think it was like episode 6 of the latest season. And essentially there's an issue and the craftsmen, they are being pegged and saying like, this is your problem. Typical like construction, this is your problem thing. And somebody goes down there, Bo-Katan, and she's like, hey, yo, I'm here. I'm me. I'm here to fix your issue. Anybody, like, tell me what's wrong with you. What did you do wrong? What did you do wrong? I'm gonna fix it. And it's like the total wrong approach. They ignored the hell out of her. Like, no receptiveness. And then the Mandalorian, ting, was like speaking their language, assuring them like, we don't mean disrespect. I come at you with respect. I have a problem I need to fix, and I need your help with it as well. Like, it was very common ground. That is what leaders should be looking at. Leaders should be trying to take a more humanistic and gradual nurturing approach. And that doesn't mean you have to be a softie to be a Mandalorian. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Sorry, I rambled.
No, you didn't. You actually hit on something really important. And I think, so the grumpy old guy on the job site, the reason he's a grumpy old guy is because of all the people that came before you. Like, he didn't start out that way. Like, that people don't start out in that fashion. And in construction in particular, because of the way that we do our labor, at least in union construction, we almost start up with an adversarial relationship with our labor. Like, it's very, very much like, oh, we don't like the way you're doing it. Let's get someone else to come in and do it. And there's none of that cultivation. There's none of that nurturing. There's none of that as part of a company. I know I'm really, really always kind of blown away by the fact that it doesn't exist when it's so obvious that that's how to gain productivity is actually like I have a bunch of trees in the back, and I'm just telling you right now, if you do not prune those trees, if you do not cultivate those trees, you will get bad fruit every damn time. Like I have trees that people thought weren't even apple trees, and I'm like, no, you just have to cut off all the bad branches and let them bloom, and you're awesome. You have big apples again, and it takes some time and it takes some effort, like you put in. But I think what happens a lot, and this is not this is actually to give a little bit of defense to some of those people that are going to those job sites, is they're that person, that bottleneck person, and they're a PM, and there's a lot of pressure on them, and they want you to feel their pressure, and you are their problem. And you know what they really don't have? They really don't have time. They really don't have time to be human with that other person. And, I mean, I wonder, Kristina, like when you're trying to talk to these people about how to be better nurturers, about how to breed belonging in your organization, like what are some of the core habits that you're saying you as leadership, you have all these habits that come from being, I mean, I gotta say, I think a lot of it does come from being those bottlenecks and not having the time and not and having the pressure. But what are some of the things you really encourage them to change in habit wise?
I think the first step is it's really some self-awareness, some honest self-awareness. I think no one's perfect. Like I'm by far not perfect.
Jeff just frowned. I think Jeff doesn't. Jeff, don't worry. She
think
wasn't talking
perfect?
about you. She was talking about someone else.
No.
No, it's just him. Don't worry about it.
I'm frowning because if you can't see, I'm lit up by my blinds, and I keep trying to get the thing. I'm frowning because it keeps ending up right in my eye.
You're like a groundhog.
Yeah, we're in the summer. I'm not at my like I can't stand up because my back and so I'm like grimacing at the light. Sorry, I threw us off there. But,
Kristina, I very much agree. No one's perfect, but
no one is perfect.
Yeah, and it just takes some honest self-awareness. I think similarly with that framework and those questions with the traffic light that I talked about, is how are you building trust among your people? What is your evidence that they trust you? What evidence have you provided that you trust them, right? And those types of questions, it's that assessment that I'm talking about. It really brings to light some things, but you have to take it honestly, right? Like you can't be like, oh yeah, they totally trust me because I give them money and I give them a job, and it's like, well, be honest, like think deeper. And so there's like those probing questions. And another thing is like what we're doing at the summit is role playing, because I think it's really hard to see things in your own shoes, like how you're doing it. And so we have some exercises where you are purposely going to be in a different person's role. You get prompts on like things you say, how you react, and you can start to experience the other person's situation. You can do that on your own by observing and listening. Again, something that I had to, I don't even know. It's sometimes people think it's like a man-woman thing because like women are so analytical. It's so not true. Like my robot husband, he like knows how to input data all the time. You just have to allow yourself to compute that data. So I would say self-awareness by data gathering. Ask your people. I think it is amazing when they do like 360 feedback, because there's like an anonymity aspect of it where people can give that feedback, even though I know when I was sitting in that I didn't fully feel like it was anonymous, so I couldn't, but you get a slither of it. So put yourself in those types of vulnerable situations where you're getting open to some feedback. And I'm gonna curse again, but like, the story about like how every group has like a bitch, and like if you don't know who the bitch is, it's you.
Yeah,
that might be the case. Like if there's no one in your group that you think is like a problem or like divisive, I don't know, maybe you have a great group, unicorn group, or maybe it's you. Like
it's probably you. That's like a really good hint that it's probably you.
Yeah. And also this is critical. When you gain self-awareness, do something about it. Because I've met so many people that will open up to me and say, look, I know that I'm being an asshole to my people, but I just don't even feel like I can come back from it anymore. I feel like this is me. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like this is what they've known for 30 years. How do I just change? Give yourself grace and your ability to grow. Like just like take those steps to actually become different once you become aware. Otherwise, it's willful ignorance
Mm.
to have that information and not do anything about it. That's actually, and I'm gonna call some people out. I'm sorry, but also hashtag not sorry, but it's kind of cowardly. And
Uh,
I am a coward because there are some things that I know about myself that I need to do more, but I haven't done yet. So instead of saying like I'm never going to change, say not yet and choose these things. Become that person that you want to be, become that person that you wanted to have when you were in this industry. Become the person that you wish you had when you were coming up, when you were hitting hard times, when you were trying to learn. Be that person.
oh, right on, man. I totally agree with that. Like you should live and you should react in like the world that you want to have exist around you.
Mm.
Like if you want a world without some things, you better be acting that way the whole time. And you know, I got to say what really resonated with me is people that understand but then don't make a change because they feel like other people aren't. The one thing that I think everybody realizes is if you have somebody that is working with you, somebody that is subject, I'm going to say subject to your whims, they tend to be very, very forgiving when you stop being an asshole. Like literally, because their whole life is, oh my gosh, I wish he wasn't an asshole. So even if you're slightly less of an asshole, they're having a party on the weekends because you were slightly less of an asshole this week. You know, so like it's sorry to swear so much, but I mean, seriously, I've had bosses who have had some level of, I had a boss who had a chainsaw accident. All right. And for whatever reason, this chainsaw accident humbled him, and we started to use it as a term, like actually with new hires we're like, yeah, he's really cocky, he's kind of an asshole, hopefully he'll get humbled soon, like hopefully he'll have that project that makes him realize he doesn't know everything, like you said, he's not always perfect, because once someone is humbled, like we're willing to give you a million other chances, but you gotta act upon that humbling or that change that happens in order to have it actually be change. Other than that, it's just information.
Yeah, yeah. And it's not easy by far. It's not easy to do any change. That's like what I said is like for a sustainable change, you got to have your little innovative idea, which is like maybe I won't be an asshole, plus some comfort. Like maybe you're still sarcastic. You know what I mean? Like, that's how we grow.
Yes, with sarcasm and humility. That's how everyone grows.
And here's the other thing is don't expect people to come around immediately. Okay? Because that's not on them to be like, oh, wow, you're nice now? Okay. Hey, buddy. Like, that's just not how that's going to happen. That's why we go back to the sense of belonging and how it's rooted in trust. In fact, they will probably distrust you more when you're starting to be nice because they'll be like, what's about to happen? What's he up to? What's she going to ask me to do? You know, like it's going to feel, there's going to be a period where that is just the natural transition from when you're trying to build trust from a very distrustful standing point. And don't get frustrated with that. You have to, this is where stoicism comes into play. This is where you want to stay cool and collected and let that transition happen. It's going to be annoying and rough. And you're like, why aren't they better now? Because I'm nice now. Like it doesn't happen that quickly.
No, you don't shed those scars that quickly for sure.
Yeah.
I wonder if it's one other thing though, and I think we're really guilty of this in a lot of industries, especially construction, is I don't think we teach people how to lead. I think
Right.
you're a carpenter and you become a foreman. And I'm saying this, I had Tyler Williams on the content crew, and he and I were talking about this pretty extensively. It's just like we promote people and don't train them. We
Mm-hmm.
don't teach them. We don't have that. So they either fake it and they figure it out, or normally exactly what you're talking about, Jonathan, earlier, I think happens too often is you don't learn that as a leader, sharing all of that downhill and saying, put doesn't help, right? Like you said, Jonathan, you had to prune those trees to get the apples. Well, I will tell you right now, sir, if those trees were in my yard, I wouldn't have known that until somebody taught me that that's what I have to do to get apples. And now I have something I can emulate. And I think the only thing we have to emulate is people doing it wrong a lot. So I don't think we educate on leadership, on empathy, on any of that in a way that can translate to the industry. And I don't think that's alone in construction. I've seen that in my IT career completely. I've seen it in tech. I've seen it all over the place. I know founder stories that you listen to and read about. It's like, well, I founded this thing because I had this great freaking idea and now I got to lead people. But that is not what and it's like, well,
I agree with you, although I would say we attempt to teach them, but a lot of time we have bad leadership training. I can't tell you how many times
I like that.
Her husband's an introvert. One of the things that my wife is a big introvert. Actually, when you said your husband was an introvert, I'm like, oh, just so you know, introverts need to feel belonging and trust with the people they're with more than anyone else, because we like to be alone. We like to be alone a lot, but we don't like being lonely. And the only way you can be alone a lot and not be lonely is you have belonging and trust with the person that you're with. But like, I see so many training sessions and I walk in and I look and I'm like, you're trying to make introverts into extroverts. That's not training, dude. That's problematic in so many ways. Like, we don't need more extroverts, and being an extrovert doesn't make you a great communicator. It's like, and you just nodded your head, Kristina, so I'm going to let you take it if you have something to say on it, because it's been bothering me forever.
Okay. Yes, man. Yes. Because that's totally what I was thinking when Jeff was talking. I'm like, we do teach leadership, but we don't teach leadership.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So maybe I said that wrong, and maybe I agree with you there.
But you're
no,
right.
you meant the right thing.
Yeah,
the way you said it just gave us an opening.
I love a good opening.
And I'm like, I have a passion for education. Like, if I wasn't in construction, I'd be teaching. I just know it. And what I think about so often is experiential learning. So like, hey, you can be the one who learns on the job. A lot of people have great stories about how they learned on the job and it's a success. Yes, that's because that's how we learn. But do we really need to ruin other people's starts of their careers while you're learning? No, we don't. We need better programs that facilitate those type of environment where you can learn on the job, where you're put in very real situations, not some of these like super lame leadership things where it's like, Becky called in sick and should you let her stay at home? I don't know what they are. They're all bullshit. I hate them.
Yeah, I turn off too. Like it's like halfway through, I'm like, oh great. Like, this is in like 9 books that I don't like any of those 9 books anyway.
Yeah, you can't be told and then you learn it. You have to feel it. You have to experience it. And this is not about feelings. This is about experience. It's about life, right? It's how you learn that a hammer hurts when you hit your finger when you miss the nail. Like, it's how you learn these things. And so, yes, those leadership trainings where they're like one size fits all is not only ineffective, but I feel like it's incredibly rude because it's assuming that literally everybody's going to fit one mold. And that right there is just so anti-belonging. like you can have such diverse types of leadership. And I think our trainings around that need to be focused more on core concepts and fundamentals like trust and how to advocate and how to invest in people in your own flavor, right? Mm-hmm. I'm also an introvert that is usually very middle ground. Like, like in the Enneagram, somebody tested me and I'm a 9. So it's like that peacemaker person. But I'll get fired up when this type of stuff happens because I know how ineffective it is. And we just don't have to do that. But not enough people are raising their hand to say, like, that's BS. Because honestly, it was a free training and it's like paid for and they probably fed you and they hit Maslow's hierarchy of needs of security and food. So you're like, that's fine. Let me just deal with this in 2 days. But to really eradicate these behaviors, we have to change the way that we are subjecting people to learning and workshops and go much more experiential.
I gotta say, people don't talk back in a workshop that should. Like the people that do talk back in a workshop are the people that you already know what they need. Like they're, me and Jeff both do a bunch of public speaking all the time, and the best thing is when someone comes up and they tell you something, and you're like, "Oh crap, you're right." And I've had it happen twice in like big presentations where someone's brought up the fundamental problem with what I was just teaching, and you're almost like, "Okay, cool. Could you come up here with me and explain that better, because I think you're right, and I think what I just said was wrong." And I don't think there's the freedom to do that in our industry. You're tired to be a teacher, and when someone teaches you, you have to like act like they're wrong. And I don't think I don't think that's right. Like it's like in debate when somebody, there is a point where you're like talking to the person in a debate and you're like, okay, you might be right. And instead of changing and going,
Marriage.
could you double down? Yeah, could you double down on what you just said? Because that might be right. But
you can't do that without trust.
Yes, and without trust and belonging.
I'm not backing down if I don't trust you to not use that against me later. Like,
yeah, I'm coming onto your team with the trust and belonging thing. Like, I think I'm going to add that to the autonomy, mastery, purpose, and try to integrate that together into something.
Trust is so key. Like with play, right? We know how, like, there's so many studies about how play increases productivity, wellness, like all the things. Like, I don't even need to talk about it. There's a million books. But we view play as either a luxury or a risk. And the only way to overcome that and see it as a requirement for all the productivity that we could harness is if we had trust. Because ain't nobody going to be playing around if they think their job's on the line. If they think, I can't step out of this box because, and then they're going to like, hey, what are you doing? It's just, that's just so key, is the trust part. And I think it's like some of the most critical things that can even permeate through an organization. Because right now, for the most part, we're talking boss, employee, peers. But how do you build trust in an organization? Jeff hit on it. Example. You have to lead by example. I went to this one company dinner, and I was sitting next to someone that was an SVP, and the other person was a new hire of like 2 months. And I was talking to her, and I was like, how do you like it? Blah, 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 all the things. And I asked her very pointedly, of like, how do you, like, do you feel comfortable enough to talk to this guy, right? SVP. And she's like, absolutely. Yeah. And I was like, well, what made you feel like you can actually open up? Did he just say that and you believed it? She's like, no. He like reached out to all of us one-on-one and like facilitated it first. Because that is a world of difference. If someone says like, hey, if you need me, my door's open, that's a nice gesture, but there's no trust building with that. There's no, like, it doesn't feel, again, it's not an experience you've experienced for, so you don't know if it's actually real. It could just be posturing, which we see often. Whereas that leader, higher up, probably wouldn't see this person again for, I don't know, 2 years, if I'm honest. But it still mattered enough. He was in town. He wanted to meet with everybody. And it wasn't for long. Sometimes it was like at coffee. Sometimes it was 10 minutes. Sometimes it was 2 minutes. And it's like, that's got to be your number one plan, which is like build trust with your teams. Stop, whatever the hold stop. What's the word? Like stop.
Yeah.
Build trust with your teams. And it's like, it's such a ripple effect of of things. And there's so many ways to do that. And it has to be authentic. Because if you try to do a trust exercise that's not your vibe, that isn't your style, it's going to feel inauthentic and people are going to trust you less. So, like, be careful with that. Yeah.
There's a couple things that I want to, I'm trying to think about how we would go about doing that. Not only, so you have this like in an organization, right? And you can feel it whether the organization has it or not. And I think people fail to pick up on it. I think they like to write it off as other things, but I'm interested in how can you do that for a construction project when all the players at the table come from different companies, different cultures? How do you promote that? How does that even work? Because what I think I heard out of that it goes back to something my old boss Kelly Doyle used to say is you got to go slow to go fast. Right? That's like I think he got that from the military where he came from, but it was all about building that trust and taking that time to build that trust pays huge dividends down the road. Right? Because you all know and you trust that when the mechanical goes off with the drawing to do what they need to do, that if you trust, they're doing it. You know, if you don't trust, you're asking them for the drawings all the time and checking in on them. And now you're just doing more work. Like, how do we, and especially given that, well, industry wide, we've always, draw our swords and go to every meeting.
I was wondering what this is.
We draw our swords. And
I was doing the same thing. I'm like, what are you doing?
We go to every meeting with our sword drawn, like, I'm going to fight my way out of here better than you. Like, you know, like I had an estimator tell me that, you know, that I go to every meeting prepared to fight my way out. Like, I'm like, oh, that is an awful experience. Like, how do we
adversarial existence?
How do we change an industry like that? I mean, I got thrown out. I can tell this story because I won't tell who it was, but I was on a call with a bunch of folks that were theoretically talking about this utopian future that they were pushing for. And I said, you know, guys, this is all fine and good, right? Like academically to talk about this. But when the mechanical contractor falls over, how quick you think you're going to kick them? It's a knee-jerk reaction, folks. Like this doesn't go away overnight. Right? Like you intentionally have to do this. So I'm wondering for those folks that are thinking about it academically, because it's where it has to start, right? You got to think about it first. I mean, it's something I think, Jonathan, you hit this earlier. This, Kristina, to me is what is so powerful about you is your ability to connect those dots in a human and in a situation very, very quickly and then articulate it, which you did in a day, probably take me a month. You know, because at first I had to find my way through the forest to find and connect these dots. I'm wondering how this type of experience we could build in the industry. Can we, first of all, and secondly, how?
I think anything's possible. That sounds super annoying, but it's true. And the academic part, that bothers me. I'll say, like, even though I can be very analytical, I'm also prone to overthinking. And the only way to stop overthinking is to do something and take action. And so with any great idea, you have to like go try it. Go try to have those relationships, you know, like what I'm saying, try play in your environment and see what happens. You have to try it in order to see if it is going to work or not. And I think people are afraid to do that because I think they need like this fully baked out full thing and being like, this is going to be the perfect combination of ingredients and then hope it works. Whereas like, that's actually slow because like, if you're going to keep waiting until you're fully baked, which is impossible to be 100% perfect, then
waterfall versus agile.
Yeah, you've left so much opportunity on the table already by waiting. Just take a small next step, right? So I do think you're right about I think I know the group you're talking about too. And it can get you have to build in with any implementation, you have to build in just trialing it with some people that you've already built trust, right? So again, step one. And also accept the reality that it's going to be the same way as that a-hole manager that's all of a sudden nice. There's going to be a gap of time where there's distrust with what's happening. And you need to accept that so you can build it in. Honestly, it's like you need to start as early as possible with your people, building that partnership. And particularly, I would say find the most negative naysayer person and one-on-one attack them. Like, not attack, but like, like hone in on them. Because then that person would be your biggest advocate for when everyone else is trying to fall back to the old ways. Yeah, I think that's really important.
I like it. Perfect is the enemy of good. Like we perfection keeps us from starting almost everything. Yeah. And in fact, so in that vein, I'm interested in, what does a play exercise at work look like? Like, give me an example.
Yeah, right on. Tell us that.
Jonathan.
Depends on how much time you have,
yeah.
Right? Like,
we have time.
I think that's also not.
Let me check with the producers. I think we're good.
Oh no, she meant how much time you have for the workshop.
I know.
But there are, and that's another misconception I want people to know about, is like play can be very simple. It can be interwoven. It doesn't have to be like you stop work for 4 hours and you do a workshop, because that can seem daunting. But let's see, one of the funnest, one thing I did, which is playful, is we had a push-up contest at work. And on the some sort of recurring time interval, I can't remember, we'd be doing push-ups or planks. And it was like this little competition. It took no more than 3 minutes, depending on what level of difficulty we are. But everybody in the team did a plank or everyone in the team did push-ups. And that's very playful. And the time investment for that was 5 minutes. But the energy and the flow and the camaraderie that you got from that was so much longer. So I think we need to allow ourselves to not overthink the word play as well.
Yeah, no. Funny that you go to the push-up and plank thing. I worked for active.com back in the day, and in its heyday, we had this incredible guy, Arch Fuston, that ran our basically employee wellness program. It was called Active X because everything was cool back then when you said X with it. It was like, it made it extra extreme. And he just thought it was funny and did that. But we had this push-up challenge between all of us. And this will date it because cameras weren't a regular thing. So we would call the other office and tell them all right, we're doing it. And there's a bunch of us that would just do it. But I noticed it bleeding over into our team. We had a particular dude that I always loved working with, but a lot of people had friction with him. And he was on this push-up challenge with me, and we just didn't have that friction because we had some sort of common ground. And I didn't even think of that. When you keep saying play, I didn't even think of it as something as easy as that, as quick as that. I mean, I'm wondering, so push-up challenge, what could a project team, that's kicking off their project together? I've heard of a lot of, new innovative things project teams are doing to kick themselves off, to really bind them together at the beginning. What are other examples of it? Are there other stuff you've done?
There's leveling degrees where more productive play than others, like the things that you'll experience at the summit with Legos. They're very high level concepts and sort of deeply rooted issues, but we're using Legos to sort of build them out. And there's a very specific order of steps that you take your team through. There's certain levels of traps and secrets that you allow them to experience. I don't necessarily want to give you all that right now, so I won't.
No, I think I want to. I want to
come to the summit.
Because I wanted to say right now is the best time to say, if you want to experience and learn what Kristina's talking about, go to sobuilt, SOBUILT.com/play and come join us. It is a limited event and it will sell out and you don't want to miss out. So get on there. If you want to be the leader that you think you can be, this is the opportunity to go experience it. And I'm excited. I'm going to be there. Jonathan, are you going?
I can't go this year. I'm probably going to go in the future, and I may go as a student. I mean, I'm cool with going as a student. I think one of the things that I thought was cool is like this is the first of this type of event that's going to take place within our industry. It really is. It's the first one that, and this does happen in other industries. Just so you, like back when I was an engineer, I had a similar workshop that I went to that actually was formative because of the play and because of some of the other things. I did have a last question for you. We are coming up on time, and I wanted to give you two, and it's kind of one of the hard ones. So, I was a CTO of a company, and I really do believe in play. In fact, like anybody who worked for me will tell you, but there is a level at which, like, whenever I hire somebody, I say, "What do you like to build?" That's like my major hiring question, because if you don't like to build anything, you're in the wrong industry. Like you should come out with like, "Oh, I like to build this and this and this," and then I know you're good. Because we all like to go play with Legos. Some people don't like to play with Legos. Like, I'm dead serious. There are people that don't like to play with Legos. What they like is money, and they come into our industry and they want money and they don't want to play with Legos. So when you talk about belonging, I think there's a point at which you have to say, what is the point where good leaders look around and they say, "I love you. You're someone I work with. Not I love you, but I respect you. You're someone I work with. I don't think you belong here." And the reason can be, I've watched you play, and you don't play the way that would make you part of this industry. You play in a way that's inspiring, but in a different, like, I literally watched this person that worked for me, and I watched them play, and I'm like, "Listen, man, I like you. I like you a lot. You get along well. You will be a really good employee and never be happy. What you wanted was a bigger paycheck. What you should actually be doing is," he was a graphic artist. There was a legit reason he should be doing graphic art instead of spending his life building buildings. And at the time, I was hiring graphic artists because they're good at technology, and there's a lot of art building past, like you'd be surprised how many foremen are actually artists that are just like they like to build and art, so therefore they're awesome. So have you ever in your life like seen somebody, watch them play because you encourage play, and said, "You should be playing in a different sandbox"?
Have I ever told someone they should be playing in a different sandbox? I'm a molder. So it depends on how much time I have, right? Like sometimes you just cannot take, like you don't have enough time to take this grain into a diamond or whatever I'm so bad at these phrases, but like
that was a good one. Yeah.
Like you just don't have the time, and like you need to focus on the ones that are already 80% complete, because otherwise, again, burnout. You are going to stretch yourself too thin trying to help others, that it's at your own demise, sacrifice. And I never like to tell someone they don't belong here. I like to show somebody and let them go to that conclusion themselves. But that's like my tactic, because I don't think things are yes and no. I think sometimes it's a not yet. So I still want to make sure that bridge is there, and they understand what we're all about authentically, and they can feel when they don't fit, and I will know too, and advise like, "Hey, you might be great at graphic design." You know what I'm saying? Like in your example, would you like to have a stint in this department? And then they will naturally go. And that's really what good mentoring is about, and why we need more good mentoring in our industry to prevent burnout. because sometimes people are doing the wrong thing for way too long, and like they could be an all-star, but they're like average
Yeah.
because they're not in the right spot. So I think I dream big for literally everybody. Um, it's just that comes down to a timing thing. And I will say one thing in my 4D learning program, what I do is I have a cohort where education isn't a right for everybody. You can all come. But at the end of it, there's an assessment. And I'm judging you not just off of your technical abilities that you learned in the training, but also your abilities to communicate, to do these things collaboratively. Those people go on to my one-on-one coaching where we go into advanced stuff. The other people have this core awareness and ability to do like very simple average stuff. So they still get that. I think we should be treating our people like that as well. We have to allow everyone the opportunity to experience the thing, and then they get that judgment and special program. That's like a normal thing. Like
Yeah, yeah.
everyone does that sort of stuff.
No, but the reality is, I think there are people who are all stars if we were just in a different venue.
Hmm.
Like literally, this is not where you're going to belong. And I think if you're going to push belonging, I think the hard part on the other side is there are people that would flourish and would really, really, really like meet their best self somewhere else. And there
Hmm.
are a lot of things in construction. That's the great part of construction, right? We're this huge tent. We got like technologists and we got marketing and we got all this stuff. But like I remember sitting and watching that guy and I'm like, dude, I want to read your book. I want to read your comic. I don't want you here. I love you, but I don't want you here because you're way too good. Like you're legitimately an all-star. You're only here because contracting also pays really good money. Really, really good money for a lot of people.
Oh.
So I will hand it over to you, Jeff. I know that we are over time. But maybe you have some last thoughts too.
No, I actually I always appreciate sitting down with Kristina. I always learn a little bit of something. I'm always shown my own little mirror in some way, shape, or form. So I think we all need that, and I think we appreciate it. I don't think that we talk about the topics that we talked about tonight with burnout, et cetera, and using the terms for it. And then sometimes we talk about it and we never have anything to do about it. And so I think it's pretty awesome to have something to do about it, which is we're all on a trek to continue to prevent burnout, to stay going, because to play the game you got to stay in it, and that's part of it. And we lose too many people from this industry. Too many people have had Kristina's experience. Again, go back to episode 58 and listen, but there was a real moment where she almost left construction, and we would have been worse for it. So thank
Lots
you
of
for
people.
yeah, thank you for coming today, Kristina, and to sit down with us. Um, we told them all where to go. Any final thoughts before we take it off into the podcast ether?
Um, it's funny because I don't feel like we use the word burnout very often, but it's really the deficiency of some of these core concepts that we talked about that lead you into a chronic cycle of burnout. So it's like also noticing what your natural patterns are that are contributing to it, I think is a really important exercise for you to do. And allow yourself to be part of the blame, but not all the blame. So I don't know where you are on the spectrum. If you think it's everyone else's fault and it's not yours, or if you think it's all your fault and not theirs, it's a mixed. So yeah, just there's so many avenues. If anybody wants to contact me, I am a human being. So like when you see my image that's not moving on LinkedIn, you can still text it and it'll come back to a human being. And I just love connecting with people and trying to put them in the right resources. So yeah, thank you so much, you guys, for letting me talk about this. I feel like I could talk about it for hours and days.
Well, we're gonna go have a whole day and talk about it. So we're excited.
That's
I'm
right.
excited. So I will see you in Austin, Texas soon. If you guys want to join us, if you want to be a part of it, check out sobuilt.com/play. And with that, I'm going to take us on out of the day here. Thank you all for tuning in to episode 63. We called it the Burnout Brigade, but I'm going to say it's building a Super Nintendo.
Oh, yes.
Oh my
God, the greatest like slip up.
Beautiful.
I had to bring that one back, and we're out.